Hi everyone, you're watching the virtual Amicus and I'm Jay Ludha. So today's topic for discussion would be on real estate due diligence. Now, due diligence is one term that every lawyer has either heard about or has come across at some given point of time, even law students for that matter. Now, in simple language, it refers to certain reasonable measures that every individual should adapt before executing an agreement in relation to real estate and immovable property. It also involves a detailed analysis or investigation conducted by buyers or investors before making a property purchase decision, which would also include meticulous examination and verification process, which is undertaken before making any significant transaction pertaining and especially in the area of real estate. Now, joining us today on the virtual amicus to assist us better is somebody who needs absolutely no introduction in this field, in this area of law. She is a renowned and a highly respected solicitor practicing in Bombay. Her practice areas include conveyancing, civil litigation, and estate planning. In conversation with Miss Nazaqat Lal. So thank you so much, Nazaqat, for readily saying yes, for readily agreeing to do a session on a very important and a popular topic, which is real estate due diligence. Anything that you wish to say about our channel before we start with your session?
Firstly, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'd also like to congratulate you for the quality of content that you've been creating and the wide variety of speakers you've been bringing, particularly former judges. The consistency with which you've been recording, I think you're on the verge of completing 3 years now, so I hope you continue this.
Well, thank you so much for all the kind words. It really means a lot to me and my entire team. So can't wait for this session to begin. The stage is set. The floor is all yours. Over to you.
So, to start with, let's understand what real estate due diligence is. Real estate due diligence is an investigative process that's undertaken by the purchaser's advocate to ascertain the seller's title to the property, to identify and assess the risks associated with acquiring the property, and to ascertain whether the property can be used for the purpose for which it is being acquired. Now, there are two fundamental legal principles that underlie real estate due diligence. One is a transferor cannot transfer better title than he himself possesses. And two, caveat emptor, which literally translates as buyer beware and puts the legal onus on a purchaser to be vigilant. Now, coming to how is a real estate due diligence done? Now, the property being diligenced can be a parcel of land. It can be a land together with a structure such as a building, or it can be a part of a structure such as a residential flat or a commercial premises. Secondly, the nuances vary from property to property, and every property comes with its own unique set of challenges. However, there is a common broad framework within which real estate due diligence is done, and that's what I'll be setting out. So, the first step is reviewing the title deeds of the seller. The second is conducting a search at the office of the sub registrar within whose jurisdiction the property is situated. The third step is issuing public notices, one in an English newspaper and the second in a vernacular language newspaper. The fourth step is ascertaining from an architect whether any part of the land falls under setback or reservation. This becomes important because it will affect the land being available for development and the development potential of the land. The next step that's usually undertaken is raising requisitions based on the title documents provided. Now, there are many things that emerge from a real estate due diligence that would otherwise go unnoticed. So, to give you a few examples of things that emerge from a real estate due diligence, one is if there are any third party rights. These could be rights of individuals, they could be rights of banks or financial institutions, they could also be rights of government or semi government authorities. Another thing that emerges are rights of other legal heirs, rights of minors, whether there is any HUF property, whether documents have been sufficiently stamped or not, whether documents that require to be compulsorily registered have been registered or not, whether property has been sold at above or below ready reckoner value, whether there are any unpaid taxes with respect to the property. This becomes important because if certain taxes have not been paid, an encumbrance will be created in favor of the government with respect to the property. Another thing that emerges is whether there are any disputes with respect to the property. Also, if the building permissions and permissions with respect to the land are valid and subsisting. So, all these things are examples which would otherwise not be known to a purchaser unless he undertook a due diligence process. A question that often gets asked is a real estate due diligence process foolproof? The honest answer to that is no. And the reason is because there are several components that form part of a real estate due diligence which are beyond the control of the advocates. So, to give you a few examples, often there are title deeds that pertain to 30, 50, 70 years ago. These title deeds may not have been properly maintained, they may be partly lost, they may have been torn, they may be in an illegible condition. So, in such a situation, the purchaser will have no option but to rely upon the seller with respect to these documents. Another thing that is beyond the control of the advocates is that there are several documents that affect a property which are not available in the public domain and which are not easy for a purchaser to procure unless the seller provides him assistance. So, to give an example, if an income tax authority has raised a notice, it would be very difficult for a purchaser to independently procure or be aware of such a document. Another example is unless a physical survey is done of the property, it's very difficult to know whether there are any illegal encroachments or any persons in unlawful possession of the land when a physical survey is undertaken. So, in all these situations, these are all things that are beyond the control of an advocate. Further, if you see, whenever an advocate issues a title certificate or a due diligence report, there are several qualifications and several disclaimers that the advocate gives. Some of these assumptions include documents, the signatures on the documents being assumed to be true, parties who've executed the documents being duly authorized to execute those documents, parties documents being adequately stamped, documents being adequately registered. So these are certain things that a purchaser's advocate has to assume and move forward. Lastly, a question that often comes up is that if a real estate due diligence is not foolproof, then why should I undertake it? The reason why a real estate due diligence has to be taken is that one, it is the purchaser's liability and an onus placed by the law on the purchaser to undertake it. And secondly, we have to remember that when a dispute situation arises, a court will always give more preference to a buyer who has undertaken due diligence as opposed to a buyer who has not undertaken due diligence. So, a court would more likely provide certain reliefs or remedies to a buyer who has undertaken due diligence as opposed to a buyer who hasn't. In conclusion, what I'd like to say is that till a dispute situation doesn't arise, the true value or necessity of real estate due diligence will never be understood.
Well, thank you so much there, Nazaqat, for taking our time and for doing this session for us. Our endeavor on the virtual amicus has always been to solve not only basic but also complex legal issues and to do it in the simplest of the ways so that it is easy for everyone to understand and comprehend. So this session by you, conducted by you on real estate due diligence is a perfect testament to our philosophy, explaining such a complicated technical issue in property law area and then simplifying it for our viewers, where the target audience is obviously young lawyers and law students. So I'm really grateful to you for that. To all the viewers who are watching, our email is mentioned on the channel. In case if you still have any queries, feel free to write to us. We'll be more than happy to forward the same to our amicus for today's session. You can even write to the amicus for today's session directly. So the next episode is on its way. It's goodbye for now.